Welcome to the Brandland Podcast. I'm your host, Garrett Justice with Lucidpress, and today I'm joined by a special guest, Remington Reece, who's the creative director at Ebby Halliday Companies. Remington, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here. Looking forward to it.
And I got to put in a plug for Remington too. He and I have gone way back. We've spoken at a couple of conferences in the past together. And one thing I want you to know about this guy is this is like one of the deepest voices I think I have ever heard. So all of you listeners out there just get to enjoy Remington's classically deep voice today.
It's deep. It is deep.
Remington, before we jump in, why don't you give a little bit of our listeners some flavor of your background and what Ebby Halliday Companies do. We'd love to get to know you a little bit more before we jump into our topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the creative director for the Ebby Halliday Companies. We are a residential real estate brokerage and then affiliated services like mortgage, insurance, and title based out of North Texas. We're the largest real estate brokerage in North Texas, and about 2 years ago we were acquired by Home Services of America, and by joining that larger company we're now the #1 real estate brokerage in the country. And so a lot of agents. We've got about just in North Texas 1,700, 1,800, something like that. And then we've got 3 brands under the Ebby Halliday's company umbrella. Ebby Halliday Realtors, Dave Perry Miller Real Estate, and Williams True. And Williams True is based in Fort Worth. And so between the 3 brands, we sell a tremendous amount of properties, and we take care of North Texas.
Awesome. Well, that's awesome. I'm really excited to, dig into this topic today and kind of pick your brain on this. It sounds like a fun challenge that you have with those different brands, as large as your org is, all of those agents to support. And so again, I'm excited to dive into this a little bit more, but what about your background? So I know you kind of come up through, the creative design background. Is that right?
Yeah. So my background is in design and then actually kind of stats and analytics. So I've got a nice left brain, right brain kind of thing going on. But I got my start at Dave Perry Miller Real Estate about 7 years ago now, which is surreal saying that out loud. But yeah, I've been at the company for 7 years now, and started out as a designer, and then just over the years kind of worked my way up to creative director now over the whole organization.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, let's jump into our topic today. Cause again, I'm really excited to pick your brain on this topic. So, as Remington and I were talking about, potential topics before our show today, he kind of threw out this idea of credibility through design. And I really like that phrase, and I want to unpack that before we dive into it completely. So Remington, as you talk about credibility through design, what does that really mean to you? Can you help us understand that?
So credibility through design is fundamentally, it's an ideal. It's something that needs to be strived for at every level of an organization, and double so within the kind of creative department or the design department within that organization. In my opinion, and there's probably a lot of people, even in my own organization that may not agree with this, but it is the ultimate goal. It is far and away the most important thing to achieve. By credibility through design, I mean, as soon as somebody sees your collateral, your marketing pieces, any exposure that they have to your brand, they are immediately comfortable, they are accepting, they are confident, and by doing business with you, they feel like they're making the right decision right out of the gate. And if that can be achieved at the creative level, then I would make the argument that you're doing marketing's job for them, strategy's job for them. Well, maybe not doing their job for them. That's probably going to upset a lot of people, but you're certainly making their lives way, way easier right out of the gate.
Yeah, I love that. I think one of the things that stands out to me about, as you explain that, is so often creative and design is something that we kind of slap on the end of a project, right? Mm-hmm. It's, designers get hit up last minute of, hey, can you make this thing look pretty? But I think what you're talking about here is, design can add the most value getting involved much earlier in that process and helping shape where that strategy goes. And when you do that and you work really closely in conjunction with, your internal clients or the people requesting, materials or design from you, it can help to strengthen that when it goes out into the world. And from that, you get that credibility. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that has to occur at every single level. And the more companies that give the design group a seat at the table, whether that's C-suite or whether that's just the kind of initial concepting or strategy meeting, the end product becomes that much better. Everything is elevated, and if you put design first, the rest of it follows. It truly does.
It's awesome. So, I want to break down something that you said, a little bit earlier as you're explaining this idea of credibility through design. You kind of talked about that's the ultimate goal that, designers, in your opinion, should have to achieve. That when design goes out there into the world and people interact with it, that's when you gain that credibility. So talk to me a little bit more about that perception and why that customer perception is so important in building long-term credibility with someone.
So it's the ultimate first impression, and everything fundamentally stems from perception in the design world. But it's the first impression. It's the first interaction that they have with your product or service, and that first interaction is far and away the most important. In real estate, there's this kind of idea that when somebody pulls up to a house, a potential home buyer, when they pull up to the house, curb appeal is so important to make that first impression. And the vast majority of potential buyers, they know whether or not they want to buy that house truly within 30 seconds of pulling up to that property. It's the first impression. We all know how important first impressions are. And when you apply that to, your company or your industry, it's crucial. It's key. Yeah. And, consistency obviously lends itself to that, but it's that first impression. That's so important.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I want to understand too, from your perspective, why is design so important to that first impression and building credibility? I could, think about someone who might be playing devil's advocate a little bit, might say, whether you're selling real estate or, a university or some other product online, whatever it is, design is only a portion of really the full customer experience or interaction. I know there's an opposite side to that too, where someone might respond to that, but in your opinion, how would you respond to that? Why is design such a crucial element in building that credibility?
Design is like math. It's a universal language. Everybody speaks it. Doesn't matter what part of the world you're in. Everything that you see, everything that you interact with, whether it's, kind of more true to form marketing pieces all the way to architecture or city planning, everybody understands design. And in my opinion, the best design is rooted first and foremost in math. It's got a mathematics base and everybody speaks it. I was fortunate enough, right before all of the pandemic stuff happened, but I was in Southeast Asia for a couple of weeks over New Year's. And I must have taken 5,000 photos, 4,000 of which were ads, billboards, commercials, everything that I just saw, because I couldn't read the language. I was looking at Thai and Japanese and Chinese, and I don't unfortunately speak any of those languages, but I was able to understand the design. And it's everybody can speak it. Everybody understands good design versus bad design.
Yeah. Something we've seen too, and I know you and I have talked about this before, but design is there. The expectations for great design are increasing. It doesn't matter if you have design background or not. Design is getting better and better across every channel. Oh, and by the way, there's more and more channels and more content of things that need to be designed, right? And the combination of those things, raises the bar for design. and makes it such a vital part of, the whole customer experience and journey. As doesn't matter what you're selling, there's
Right.
design that is a part of it, right?
Well, it's expected. It's expected now in any industry, no matter what you do, who you are. Good design, strong design, it's expected.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Well, I'm curious then. So this idea of credibility through design, how have you gone about striving to achieve that in your role at Ebby Halliday?
So I teach classes periodically ranging from, market analysis to design and branding and things like that. And one of my favorite things to do while teaching the design class, which obviously credibility through design is a major component of that class, is if you ask a room full of real estate agents, take 30 seconds and describe yourself, your business, your style, whatever, come up with 5 adjectives. And you give them 30 seconds, and then I guarantee you every single one of them will have trustworthy, honest, client-centric, service-oriented, strong negotiator, knowledgeable, going above and beyond. Every single one of them will have either every single one of those adjectives or the vast majority of them. And so what I try to instill within our own company is that if you can achieve credibility through design, all of those attributes are going to be articulated inherently right out of the gate. And you don't need to produce an ad that says, I am trustworthy. I am service oriented. I do go above and beyond. I am knowledgeable. The design will articulate all of that from that first impression. And then that opens the door to much more relevant and engaging content because the people trust you. They trust the design. They trust that you'll do a good job. And it kind of opens them, I guess, mentally and emotionally in some instances to be exposed to your message and to respond to it.
I think that's great. There's a couple things that I really like about what you said first that I think is maybe unique. Maybe you don't see it as unique, but the fact that you're teaching design classes to real estate agents, other people, non-designers at your company, I think is awesome. How can someone gain credibility through design, a real estate agent that's trying to build, their own brand and business that fits in with this bigger brand and business of, Ebby Halliday or whatever sub brand you guys have, right? How can they do that if they don't really understand the value and the impact of design and some of those core basics? So I love that you're teaching those classes and that you're helping them understand those principles of you don't have to say, I'm trustworthy on a billboard or on a business card or whatever to be perceived as trustworthy. It happens as you build it into the design and in the content that people consume. And as people interact with that and with you, that perception builds on itself without you even saying it, right?
Exactly. And it's, we live in the world of content creation now. Every single person with a phone is a content creator in some capacities. And, you look at the world of real estate in particular, but really any industry that deals with 1099 employees, or not employees, that's the incorrect term, but 1099 independent contractors where they're not employees, and it's very difficult to police that. And so by giving them the tools and the knowledge to identify good design, be able to articulate what they like about certain pieces, whether it's from our department internally or if it's even competitors' pieces that they see and like, for them to be able to articulate that to us only makes us better, and it only makes the interaction between us and them that much stronger. Yeah. So I think it's tremendously important.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that you shared some good ideas of some things that you're doing right now to help try to achieve that credibility through design at Ebby Halliday Companies. What about those companies, those listeners who are out there who feel like their design maybe has fallen off track a little bit and that it doesn't actually, express some of those attributes about their company, or, if it's a 1099 employee or an individual about themselves, it doesn't really express what they're wanting to. How do do you have any tips for those types of people? How do you get your design back on track to help with that?
So I think it's very, very difficult once you kind of have that aha moment where you realize what I want to be and what my design is saying about me are on two different paths. Once you kind of have that realization, I don't think it's easy or even remotely feasible to burn down the house and start over from scratch. I just don't think that's possible. Um, but I'm always reminded of the Michael Eisner quote about brands, when he said, "A brand is a living entity, and it is enriched or undermined cumulatively over time, the product of 1,000 small gestures." Um, I think what you have to do is those small gestures, whether it's 10 of them or 10,000 of them, that's how you start getting the brand and the design back on the same page. It's like steering a ship, maybe even bigger than a ship. What's bigger than a ship? An aircraft carrier. That's not, it's not easy to make a pivot and all of a sudden go 90 degrees on that. It's a time consuming, arduous process to turn that ship. But it's one that has to be made as soon as you have that realization. And that's all where it ends up, back to credibility through design. If you put that first and foremost, or maybe you had that realization that the design and the brand are not on the same page, and you want to get to that point where they're moving in the same direction, put credibility through design at the forefront of everything you're doing, and I guarantee you that will that process will start shifting back to where it should be.
Love it. That's awesome. I love that Michael Eisner quote as well. I think that some things that stand out to me in that quote specifically is, it's over time. So it's about consistency, and it's those small micro moments, everything from, the business card to how your support team answers the phone, or, the flyer that you share out, or the social post, all of those things that design is inherent in it and should be inherent in it will either enrich or undermine that brand over time. This has been great. I have one last question for you, before we kind of wrap up here, but, for some of those listeners out there who are sitting there thinking, man, I love this idea of credibility through design. How do I get everyone on board, especially leadership, bought into this idea of credibility through design? How can I have an impact on my org in helping people understand how to go about that? I'm curious your response to that. I know you kind of shared an example already with teaching design classes to some of the non-designers and help them understand the importance of design and how that builds the brand. I think that's a great way to get buy-in and get people to understand that. But do you have any other ideas or suggestions, things you've done in the past or seen other people do that can help, especially leadership, get bought into this idea of credibility through design?
So real estate as an industry is probably a great example for this, but I would imagine it's applicable in just about every industry. In the past, a couple of years ago, we have 1,700 agents. And so if we're trying to reinvent the wheel every single time with all of those, it's a tremendous expense, both for just general manpower, for salaries, and for things like that. And if you can streamline that design process and the creative process, and I guess make it more applicable to every single level within the organization, the amount of money that gets saved is mind-boggling. And what I personally have found a lot of success in is getting leadership on board with the idea of credibility through design and putting design first and foremost, is that over time, and it's a relatively quick amount of time, it's less than a year certainly, the amount of money that's saved is incredible. And that, if not everybody on the kind of decision-making side, can truly appreciate design all of the time, but they sure can appreciate saving money. Those ops guys love saving money. And I would just recommend, talking about the money-saving aspects of it. It truly does save money, and it saves time, which is more important than anything else.
Yeah. Executives are thinking about the dollars, right? So I think when you can speak their language and help them understand, the financial impact of credibility through design, then that's when it really starts ringing true and they start listening, right? So
no, absolutely.
Well, Remington, this has been awesome. I've really, really appreciate you taking the time today and sharing your insights. I'm curious if, as we wrap up here, what would your recommendation be? Any tangible steps that you think our listeners should take back to their own businesses and apply based on this topic of credibility through design?
The most valuable asset that your company has in any industry, in any country, anywhere in the world is your brand. And I would argue that design is the language of that brand and how that's communicated to consumers. Put design first. If it's not first, or if it can't be first, make it a priority. And in a lot of companies and a lot of industries, it's just not a priority, and the brand suffers as a result. And if your brand is your number one asset, then your company is failing, for lack of a better way to put it. And one of my favorite quotes about brands, aside from that Michael Eisner quote, which I stole from you actually, but it's the idea that brands, the best brands, true brands, are greater than the sum of their parts. And your brand is more than your logo. It's more than how you answer the phone. It's even, transcendent of design in general, but it's all of those pieces that come together to create a brand greater than the sum of its parts. And that's the attitude and the philosophy that you need to have moving forward. That would be my recommendation.
Excellent. Well, what's the best way for our listeners to stay connected with you or reach out if they have other questions in the future?
LinkedIn, active on LinkedIn, just Remington Reece, Dallas, Texas, LinkedIn.
Excellent. Well, Remington, again, thank you so much for taking some time today.
Yeah.
I'm curious too, last question. Have you had any good barbecue recently in Texas? I'm just missing some good barbecue.
One of the worst parts about working from home is that our office is actually located a stone's throw away from the best barbecue I've ever had. Cadillac Barbecue up in Addison, Texas. Unbelievable. Only open 2 days a week, about a 2-hour line to get into it. Well worth it.
Man, next time I come down to Texas,
yeah,
you're gonna have to
I'll take you there.
I always am looking for some good barbecue. So
yeah,
Remington, thanks again for joining us today. And I really appreciate you sharing your insights.
Yeah.
Wish you the best of luck and talk to you soon.
Thanks, you as well. Have a good one. Thanks, y'all.